In this video, I wanted to do something a little bit different. I wanted to kind of do a reactionary video on the podcast that Neo was on with NeoTokyo. There was a section of the podcast near the end that I really thought was an important conversation to kind of go over and share with each one of you. It really gives an insight into the metaverse as a whole, because we know that there's a lot of individuals building metaverse platforms that will contribute to what we discuss as the whole of the metaverse. But there's really important tools and really important ways to look at it that is vital to make any project viable in the future. And so let's get into it. They start by asking a question, and then Neo goes on to respond, and we'll kind of just interact as Neo continues to talk.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of go a little bit further in, and you had kind of talked about people coming in and having creator content. Um, how deep are people going to be able to go? I know you said sort of set up companies, and how deep are you going to let people go to come in and sort of set up really their own individual economy within the larger system of the game, and what does that look like as it sort of progresses, and people start putting time and creative energy into it. I'm really excited to see sort of what Wilder World's vision of that is.
This is a really important kind of question. There's a few things that are really important to kind of discuss within any kind of metaverse project. One is, if it's going to be interoperable, what does that look like? And the technology isn't really here, but I know a lot of people are working on it. But also, how are these individual economies going to work? How do you make it lasting? How do you make it where it's not just like what Fortnite is, where essentially you go in, you buy something, but you can't really do anything with it? Like, how do people go in and create their own stuff? How do they use the things within? And how do you prevent people from going in and making 10 million cars or 10 million shoes or whatever number of everything? Like, how do you prevent people from really expanding on that? And I think Neo really dives into this, and I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, so there's quite a few problems you need to solve in order to actually do this. A lot of people talk about this, they kind of hand wave it, and they're like, oh, like they just, the way the metaverse has talked, like, I think the metaverse, the reason nobody takes it seriously is just because how people have talked about it, and then what the actual reality was in terms of what was shipped. And I think a lot of the narrative has been, oh, you're gonna like magically be able to just be your avatar, and you're gonna jump from this world to this world to this world, and you're gonna be able to create whatever you want. And it's just been a lot of people just selling kind of hot air. But there's really some kind of like fundamental problems that need to be, so to answer your question, like, to increase the level of what people can create, there's some really fundamental problems that need to be solved. And if those problems aren't solved, that's not really possible. So the first thing that we so the idea so the answer is basically as deep as possible. But I think the context that's important is, like, you actually need to be able to solve these specific problems. So the first problem is economy. So, like, the real trick of game development, which a lot of people don't understand, if you go back and you read any, there's a great book on the creator of Doom, John Carmack, who later ran Oculus at Facebook. And just like back in those days, like, if you had to be a game developer, you pretty much needed to be like a full gigabrain, because your whole job was just trying to like make the thing as efficient as possible. And in recent times, like, games have become incredibly bloated. But basically, game companies today, they can't even manage the resources on the computer for the people that are working in the company, let alone letting the internet come and just start building all this stuff in this virtual environment. It's very, very different than social media or a web 2 company or a cloud company or whatever the case may be, because you have this finite amount of space, which is mostly on your GPU, which is loading things in, and that's determining, okay, well, what are the graphics going to look like? How much stuff can you load in and can you see on the screen at one time? And the more kind of different objects there are, the harder the computer has to work. And you can make sort of the whole world break and crash very, very quickly.
Yeah, so I mean, he kind of goes more into it, but kind of to understand all of that is if you put in all of those, like my example before, you put in 10 million different shoes or cars or whatever, by that GPU load, it's just you end up breaking the system. You're just not able to do it. And so you have to approach the economy, and you have to approach how you interact one with another, where people have a good interaction throughout the whole thing. And a lot of people aren't thinking about that. They don't know the costs in order to run a metaverse that most people think about when it comes to Ready Player One. Like there's a lot of power and energy and GPU, draw that isn't possible right now. And so there's a level of efficiency. There's a solution to be found.
So what you actually need is something like reality. Like if you think of reality, reality is built with atoms, and then there's molecules, and there's sort of this whole hierarchical structure in terms of how objects are created in the real world. And you basically need to do that within the game environment. And you need to then tie that into economy, because one of the things with NFTs, for instance, that the novel property of crypto is that you can create digital scarcity, basically. And I mean, that's basically what Bitcoin did, is they took digital value and they were able to basically enforce it with scarcity and immutability with no basically like no trusted intermediary. And that's really it. But once you can start to create like 10 NFT contracts, 100 NFT contracts, like anybody can launch an NFT, anybody can launch a token, you're pretty much just completely lost, and everything just goes down to zero because of inflation. So if we create a virtual world and all of a sudden anybody can launch whatever they want in that virtual world, well, like what is the value of one sneaker versus the other? What is the value of one car versus the other? Right? If somebody can just come in and create that for next to nothing. So what you actually need is you need a resource economy, and you need a way to constrain. It's kind of like Ethereum. How do they manage block space? They manage it with gas. And if lots of people want block space, gas goes up. So you need something similar for the metaverse, basically, where people need to purchase the raw materials that actually build out, that actually every single object is made of these raw materials. And there's a market price for those raw materials, and there's an actual price of actually creating things. And when you do create a car, it has to be made up of certain base components, because if every car is not sharing those resources in terms of how it's constructed, if you just let everybody construct things in whatever way they want, you basically lose on scalability very, very quickly. So we've essentially been building this both economic framework, but also in how we've actually built the game, that allows the very efficient sort of reuse of these underlying components or these underlying modules. And then we have our team, instead of artists sort of manually hand doing everything, we have our team basically use those procedural systems. And then basically we're going to open up those procedural systems. And then there would be a process, kind of like the App Store. Like, so let's say anybody would be able to build a building, and you can have tons of variety in terms of what that building is, or you can have tons of variety in terms of what your apartment looks like, or you have tons of variety in terms of what your store looks like. But if you want to introduce something that's like fundamentally new, like let's say like a new type of building panel or something like that, that's made out of new materials, there would be a particular process that needs to happen for that. But already I think we're talking more than you can do in any existing game. I mean, that's pretty much the starting point. But in the end, you really want it to be like the internet. You really want people to be able to go in there and have a lot of creative freedom. But you also don't want the city to just look like absolute garbage, right? Like if you're bringing people in that have worked on Dune, and some of these top things, like, no, there needs to be aesthetic guidelines. There needs to be ways in which like that city is actually amazing.
Yeah, I think this is such an incredible point that I don't hear in a lot of different spaces. I don't hear from other communities that like importance of having resources tied to the economy. So for instance, what Wilder World is doing is you have these resources, and tied to that is wild. And those resources then get refined into different things that then end up being used to manufacture these other NFTs, these other assets within the world. So there's only so many assets that can be created based on the resources that are end up used, which is then backed by the economy, which then as you go down, that is your economy to scale, right? So if more people are coming in and they're using it, there's still only a limited amount, but the demand goes up, and so the energy that comes in is greater, which then allows for that metaverse to continue to function properly. And I love his conversation here about the aesthetics, right? You want to keep the aesthetics a certain way. You want, when you go into certain cities, there's a specific aesthetics. You go into neighborhoods, there's certain aesthetics, right? And if everything is just hodgepodge of like different types of aesthetics, a lot of people aren't going to really enjoy it. But you can have that like aesthetics feel, and then the people that are within it can be the variety of different people that they really want. And depending on the different neighborhoods, different individuals would be drawn to those areas based on the aesthetics and based on kind of the vibe of the area, which is why those different neighborhoods throughout the island of Miami is so important, because people are going to be able to vibe to whatever kind of happenings will happen there. But he's talking about these different layers of keeping everything kind of tied together, and what's tied together is this economy, and the functionality of everything is tied to the economy, so that you don't have so much that are going out. But if there's a high demand, then that price goes up, just like his example of Ethereum, that when there's a high demand on the block space, then the price kind of goes up and you have to pay higher fees. So a similar type of thing will be within Wild World. There will be, at first, there's probably going to be a lot of resources, but the demand is going to be low. But then when the demand comes high, the cost of those resources will go up. So I think it's a really important element of understanding the economy and attaching it to the demand of individuals that are going to be around, and for things to not go crazy and you break the system.
Because at the end of the day, that's what people want. Like, they want to go into something that is incredible. And if you just let anybody do whatever they want, it's going to be not very good. So part of that's enforced by rules, but the other part of it is having a DAO in the city, having city council, having building codes, having all these types of things. So just a lot of things that you see emerge in the real world. We have all of that. Like, all that data is on chain, all of the building codes, all of the rules, all that stuff's on chain, but it's all run by a DAO. And so in theory, people could get together, landowners could get together, and they could fundamentally shift to structural parts of the game. Where there's no limits. But so yeah, I mean, this is like one of the things I'm really passionate about, because it was one of the hardest problems to actually solve in terms of actually making the city like, usually when you make something large scale like Minecraft or whatever, you lose on fidelity and you end up with like a more pixelated world. And so a lot of the stuff we're seeing in Unreal Engine 5, that's amazing. It's amazing, but like, it's very hard to actually have that scale. And so that's been a lot of our secret sauce, is basically figuring out how do you connect economy with the actual constraints of the GPU, with the actual creator economy, and how do you have all that stuff like come together basically in a way that will actually scale.
Well, Jared, I can see you're seeing dollar signs, because you're going to be opening up a third legal firm that's going to focus on zoning and building codes.
I absolutely was thinking that, and that's kind of exciting, where you can have like a third party come in and go up to the tribunal, whoever that is, and then the DAO, and say, look, here's what we want to do, and have it in the metaverse. That's super exciting.
Yeah, it's really exciting.
Yeah, we're designing out, like, we've designed all the primitives, like, and it's not like we're thinking about this stuff now. It's like, this is a lot of the stuff we were thinking about in 2015, 2016. Things that are underappreciated. So I think we're probably one of the only metaverse teams that started at much more of a fundamental level, looking at these as societal,
starting at the protocol level.
But yes, there will be a justice system. There will be, we already have launched 7 DAOs that power the world basically. And that number will continue. Then those 7 DAOs are different industry DAOs. So like the Wheels DAO is different than the Craft DAO is different than these are kind of different. They're almost like industry associations, basically, that define the rules of that game. But that part of it, yeah, I mean, from a legal perspective, I'm sure you're kind of like fascinated by it, because it's really, modern society is kind of built off law, right? Like first math, then language, then law, right? So this is kind of that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. We're getting a little close to the top of the hour here. Want to be respectful of your time, but are there any topics that we didn't get a chance to dive into in regard to Wilder World that you want to tackle before we wrap?
Yeah, no, not really. I think, yeah, I'd be curious what you guys are kind of think is most interesting.
Yeah, the conversation continues.
And then I'd
It's pretty
also
interesting.
be curious, like, as it relates to kind of where we're at in the market and the current meta and metaverse, potentially coming back as sort of like a major, we're starting to see like early signs of that. But yeah, maybe just would love to hear from you guys, like what you think is most interesting, and then maybe kind of just like where we're at in this from your perspective. Obviously, I have a very like inside perspective and I'm biased. Would be curious to think of like where we're at on that arc, basically.
Yeah, I mean, to tackle first, the most exciting part to me is it's probably the user generated content, like around like missions, like the ability to sort of go beyond like the current level that we're at in UGC, which, I got to watch a lot of it because I'm both an RTS player, Total War, where there's been a huge modding community, as well as like, my first taste of like modding was, if you can call it that, was, Forge and Halo, and playing all of these, crazy little like ninja maps that people would create, or, Griffball and such. So really excited to see that get taken to the next level. Probably also very pumped on, LLMs being hooked up to NPCs. Find that super exciting. I mean, that's something that, the market's starting to become a little bit inundated of, but I think it's one of those things that when people actually get like a tech demo of it and it goes beyond just like, sort of that canned LLMs, NPCs, and actually
Why
get to
December
see
21st
these
is
new
so important.
conversations that are being had and this new level of like, I hate intimacy sounds a little weird, but I guess it's accurate, of like having a closer relationship with these NPCs. Like, I'm brought back to my Harvest Moon days that I was playing on the GameCube, and how, so emotionally invested in some of these little like digital relationships with these, completely scripted, very basic NPCs. So
Avatars.
it's going to be really interesting
Can't wait for
to see how
avatars.
that develops. As far as the arc of like development, where we are in the cycle and such. I mean, just from what I've been seeing from my conversations, like we went from a holding pattern of investing and releasing content where like everybody was like a little gun shy in December and November. I always like imagine like all the penguins on the cliff in like Antarctica, and like the second one goes, everybody wants to go, but no one wants
It's
to be
like that
first.
dancing video I
Now it
just
seems
talked
like
about that
people
I
are
released
like
earlier.
sort of beating down Launchpad's doors to be like, hey, we're trying to launch, we're trying to launch, we're trying to launch. I think January is going to be crazy stacked. And, as
It's not
much
over yet.
as like the tech keeps on chugging no matter what, like it is a very entertainment, speculation driven space. So I think there's a lot of projects that have some pizzazz that they've been keeping in the back pocket, and some gunpowder, and that we're going to see sort of a real showcase of what everyone's been working on, for the last like couple years when things were a bit more quiet. So very, very excited for that overall.
Yeah, and I'll go in and kind of echo a lot of what Nick said, but I think
Yeah,
as
those were
far
great
as
comments by
the
Nick.
metaverse in itself, I think at this point it's sort of like a lot of Web3 games. It's like put up or shut up, right? At this point, to have the metaverse and have lots of interest built in it, we need to have like Wilder World come out, people go in and
December
see it and
21st.
realize, okay, wow. Yeah, like some of the things that, say 4 years ago when the metaverse kicked off, yeah, things just weren't ready, right? The tech wasn't available. But now we've come
4
such a
years
long
later.
way. Once we have that sort of title that comes out and says, here's what you can do, here's what the availability is to go have fun in it. And I think that is really the key. So I'm most excited for that to come out, to be able to have sort of another genre to go into and play. And this is almost in a way sort of a Sims, because you can do a lot of real world things into it. I mean, having building codes to me screams Sims, just because it's very close to reality. But you know, I think that people will be able to go in and have the kind of fun that you also have, shooter style stealing, like all those things are there. And I think that's really an important concept to have in a game that has the ability to sort of be more real world than others. And to me, that's that's super exciting. And I'm excited to see how not just Wilder World, but lots of our other games, some of who have started maybe recently in this bull, and others who have started last bull. So they, created, a way to survive the bear market, and now they're coming out of hibernation, and hopefully have been building for that entire time, and seeing the fruits of their labor, and how how they're going to sort of weave through the maze of the bull market, and how to position themselves. And like Nick was saying, everyone's like beating down the doors, because it's like, well, now it's time. This is a great time, obviously, for token valuations coming up soon, and I'm interested for that. So yeah, the whole thing's in general, I think this next few months are going to be really, really busy and really exciting. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, no, that's definitely cool.
Great
I totally
points.
agree
I
with you
loved it.
that it's like a put up or shut up
Yeah, I
moment.
mean, I really like that. I mean, there's been a lot of conversation. There's a lot of individuals that talk. Something that I really realized, I just released a post where I talked about, what metaverse will you choose at the end of 2025, and it ended up garnering a lot of attention. And then BOE, Ambassador Earl, he suggested like, hey, you should have a conversation with this individual. It'd be a lot of fun. And then him and I were talking like, what if we got like more individuals involved? And then now it's like this 10 person or 10 different metaverses, right? But in that post, I've gotten a lot of interaction, more than any other post that I've had. And the interesting part is that we're all in these bubbles, right? Like everyone is saying the same thing. They're just saying it about the project that they're, monetarily invested in, their time has been invested in. They've got friends there, they're just kind of passionate about it. And I'm even realizing this about myself of like, I need to understand what tech is being built in these other areas. What other things that they're doing? Are they going to be able to put up and shut up? Are they not? Like, what's going on? And so I'm really going to take the time to kind of really see what's going on, because, don't get me wrong, I know I'm in a sort of bubble. I do go out and I do probably more research than the vast majority. It's not just, hurrah, 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 cheerlead, and, Wilder World is the only one. No, I don't think Wilder World will be the only one, but for my taste, my aesthetics, my belief, what could see mass adoption and do a really good job, I think Wilder World is a great competitor. Now, you've got Hytopia and you've got Decentraland, you've got Sandbox, and some of these, Blocktopia and some of these other ones that really aren't my feel, right? Like, it's not something that I would choose. But then there's others that I want to take a look at and kind of look a little deeper underneath the hood and kind of see what's going on. And you know what? Maybe I'll do a video that kind of goes over each one of them and kind of gives my feedback. But I've just realized, based on that post, like, there's all these bubbles and they're all saying it, and they're all saying they're the best, and they're all saying they're going to be the number one. And I'm like, it's not like there's just one video game out there. There's not just one platform. There's always competing platforms. There's not just one social media site that we go to get social media. There's not just one streaming service that we utilize. There's a variety of things that we always go. We don't just go to one type of restaurant. There's going to be competition. There's going to be successful projects out there, but it's going to be interesting, who the emerging ones are, right? Like, who's going to be the next Facebook that really comes out, and then who's going to be the Instagram, and who's going to be the X or the Twitter, and who's going to be these other types of platforms that people then utilize, because that's what's really going to come out. So there's going to be other winners. They're not just going to be one. And then when things work, you're going to share. Like when TikTok came out and it was super popular to do, short form content. What do you think Facebook, Instagram, and even X ended up doing? They're going to show video. That is the content that people want to consume. But when there was too many reels and not enough like photos, like the different algorithms changed so that people would post more, right? There's more incentive to do things. So we're going to see this dynamic throughout the metaverse space, and there's not just going to be one winner, but there are going to be moments of put up and shut up. There's going to be people choosing with their money, and they're going to be at one place and they're going to think, wow, I've got the most amazing project, but then they're going to see other things that they then realize, you know what, they're doing that a little bit better. Their tech is running a little bit smoother. Their fidelity is maybe a little bit better, and I enjoy that. Their games are funner to play. Whatever it ends up being, what people enjoy, they're going to gravitate towards. And so that's really going to be the indicator of all of it. How do people utilize their time over money? Where do they spend the most time? Time will be the ultimate currency of these metaverse platforms succeeding. The more people will spend their time, the more money they're going to spend, the more use that platform is going to end up using, the more that's going to be developed and improved upon. So it's the time currency that people are going to have to win over, is how do I attract people to want to spend their time with my product? So that's going to be interesting. But let's continue to hear what Neo has to say about it.
And I'm really looking forward to that, because I feel like we've put in the work, and there's just been, as a project in crypto and as a project in crypto metaverse, that's just like, there's just been so much nonsense and ridiculousness, and I just kind of want to,
I bet you all know
people to
one or two of
see
those.
what we've done, and just to kind of just be like, do the mic drop and be like, hey, like, this is, because I think it's been years of, we have a lot of loyal supporters and people who follow the project very, very closely, but people on more the outside, I could imagine them looking at something like Wilder World and being like, this just sounds like a complete pipe dream. Which is totally, which is totally fine. And then the whole industry is, specifically metaverse, it has been so underwhelming. So I am really excited to show what we've been working on, and we're going to, by the end of this year, so right now the target is December 21st, but we're launching a pretty much like the first look at the open world.
Don't fail me, Neo.
And it's a recording of gameplay, and it will be between 12 and 20 minutes kind of thing. And it is the actual world, like the stuff, a lot of the stuff we've shared before
10 to 20 minutes,
more from the racing side, or it's been, prototypes or different types of, different pieces of the world. But this is actually sharing something that we're like ready to share with the world, basically, where we'll share pretty much the whole thing, and you'll get to experience all the stuff that I'm talking about. You'll be able to see it, just like if, before a game releases, and you can watch a mission playthrough or whatever, and you can get a real sense of like where the game's actually at. And then we're going to open up super early access in early 2021. So targeting before the end of Q1 right now. And then the game will go into, multiple years of early access, but we do think it's good enough where,
and that's something else. People not in this space, and even a large portion of people in this space, they don't realize these are just like early access. We like get to see things that are happening behind the scenes at like Call of Duty that they're just releasing a polished product, right? In Web3, in this transparency era, we really get to see the kind of behind the scenes of these things being developed. So even though this is going to be released and people are going to have a better understanding, there's still going to be years of development in order to get it to that more polished, ship it out to the masses kind of thing. So I think that's an important point to always remember.
We can start to build a real player base early next year. So it is pretty exciting. Yeah. And you're right about the technology arc. Like the tech just hasn't been there. one of the smart decisions that I think we made is there was kind of two ways you could go at metaverse in 2021. You could say, oh, the tech's not there, so I'm going to build like a pixelated, like whatever. I'm going to build something very low fidelity and not very interesting, but it's quote unquote metaverse. And in our particular case, we just saw like how fast AI was evolving, how fast procedural technology was evolving, photorealistic rendering. It's all an exponential curve, right? So if you can't do it today, like there's a good chance you're going to be able to do it in 18 months or, 3 years or whatever the case may be. And so that is exactly how we built, where certain problems we didn't know how we were going to solve, but we're like, the tech is basically going to get there. So let's just like lean into the curve. And it feels now that the wind is kind of like, is soon going to be at our back. And I think a lot of people think metaverse is, oh, it's never going to come, or it's going to come whenever. And I think we have an opportunity to show people pretty quickly, like within the next 90 days. And if we're full of shit, people are going to find out not in 5 years. They're going to find out in 60, 90 days. But I think I feel very confident that when we launch this, it's good. People are going to be like, holy shit. So really looking forward to that, given how challenging it's been with the bears and metaverse and all this type of stuff, like really planting a flag. So that that's basically it. The whole team's just cranking right now to get that ready, but you guys will be able to see it in what is today? Yeah, within like 30 days.
I'm stoked. I can't wait to see it.
So that 20-minute segment was really what I just wanted to kind of review and go over. I think there were some really important parts in that, not only for the metaverse as a whole, but also for the Wilder World community and the team and the things they're working on. December 21st is going to be really important. I think it's really important to understand how the metaverse really needs to come together, the important solutions that teams need to figure out when it comes to economy, the GPU draw, how everything kind of interlocks and how it connects to everything in order to meet the demand of all the resources that would end up needing to be used to create NFTs, to create buildings, to create cars, to create guns and ammunition and all the things that are going to be out there. In Wilder World, it's all connected to resources, and Wild is what backs the resources. So you literally have a pipeline from beginning to end that's connected to real life energy, which is really interesting, something I really look forward to. Obviously, they've got to build all the tools, make everything seamless, and kind of get in to be able to have really cool UIs, really cool things that you kind of interact with in order to make it really interesting for the users, to really keep that daily active user base high and engaged so that they can continue to develop and continue to improve. So I'm really excited for this like deep look into it, as well as the access by end of Q1. So there's a lot of things that are going to be coming out. You got Z-Chain mainnet, you've got the Rebellion, open world. We're going to have like Will's industry, staking. There's just so much coming in such a short period of time that it really is a moment in the first Q1 of put up and shut up, which in line with the bull market is incredible timing. That if they can really pull this off, really put marketing behind it, really do a great job of getting it out, helping people be able to see the things going on, the team is going to be successful in kind of launching into the bull market and being able to ride the next bear and working for the next 3 to 4 years and making sure that the next launch is even more incredible, is more polished, has more features, more time sinks in it, where people just really love interacting with Wilder World and really love the ability to be able to create, build, and have an economy and kind of innovate and build their own economy within the economy. So I'm really looking forward to it. Thanks for taking the time to kind of look over this. Go and I'll leave the link to this full video. The beginning, Neo kind of goes over the origin story. If you really like origin stories of Wilder World and everything, I would recommend you going back and kind of hearing that story, watching the whole thing. But go in, make sure that you subscribe. Go and give them a subscribe. NeoTokyo's doing some really awesome things. Obviously, with Alex and Elio, there's a lot of power behind that project. And so I'm sure we can expect a lot from them. But thanks for taking the time, guys. Until next time, we'll see ya.